Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the space. Today, we are talking about our third topic now, about intersectionality between uh, asexuality and age. The research that I'll be talking about pulls from a 2025 journal called The Archives of Sexual Behavior. And the authors of this journal are Borzowski, Chopik, Weidman, O, and Weaver. That will be the journal I will be majority pulling from. Now, this journal is really interesting because it specifically focused on the area of discussion today, which is the intersectionality of asexuality and age, but not as a how do people teach adolescents sexual education, and how does experiences in adolescence lead to whether or not people identify as queer later in life? How do those societal factors work? It's a little bit different than that. Now, asexuality and age is an area in which there was not a lot of research. When I was doing my lit review, this was an area that I actually really struggled to find research on because there wasn't a lot out there on the web. But I also had very limited tools. So let me know if you guys decide to do your own research, if you find anything different. Because, again, this is not all the research that's out there. However, I think asexuality and age is an under-researched topic. That being said, this study done in 2025 in the Archives of Sexual Behavior are looking at how asexuality is both socially and personally experienced by people of different ages. And this was a study done with participants ranging from 14 years of age to 50 years of age, a very wide audience. And it was really valuable for my purposes here to pull from such a wide range. And so I'd like to begin with a quote from the journal that says, "Defining and negotiating one's sexuality is a lifelong process." End quote. So the study found that adolescence is the same time where people tend to experiment with sexuality. In my last episode, my interviewee and I talked about middle school and how much of a harrowing experience that can be socially. But the researchers found that this was about the same time that the participants also considered adopting the asexual label, because there was so much change happening and so much discovery that their asexual discovery was also prevalent during that time. And so the quote that we started with at the beginning, saying that's defining and negotiating sexuality is a lifelong process. For these researchers, they found that that process starts about the same time for everyone. More specifically, for the participants who identified as asexual that they involved in this study. But again, going back to that middle school experience, I think we can all agree that a lot of discovery happens and then continues for our entire lives in adolescence, in middle school, in the ends of elementary school, whatever you may want to call it. However, the researchers did find there was a pattern when they quantified the participants and the participants' experiences, that people who identify as asexual, and this is a quote, people who identify as asexual tend to be older. Now, when I read this research, I wondered if that may be due to the relative recency of the knowledge around the term of asexuality. So those who identify as asexual may stumble upon the term later in their lives, but yet may potentially still feel that they have always identified under an asexual label. And that the researchers found the same thing. They said that, again, while most people considered their orientation, their sexual orientation, their romantic orientation in adolescence for the first time, the participants shared that regardless of like the novelty of the label, regardless of the recency of information or knowledge, they had mostly never felt physical attraction or sexual desire throughout the duration of their lives. So, as I said, the recency of the label had something to do with their connection with an asexual identity, but their lack of sexual desire, the lack of physical attraction had been there their entire lives. It wasn't until that they found a label and an associated community with that label that they then identified with the label asexual and identified with asexuality. I think that's a good pivot point to note, is that just because there's nothing labeling or defining or characterizing an experience does not mean that that experience only starts when it is labeled, when it is qualified. That's really important, and I think that is what I was looking for in discovering this topic. So when I was interested in and really thought about what the intersection between asexuality and age might look like, it was certainly from a perspective of, okay, what does the novelty, what does the term asexuality, the knowledge about it, offer those who encounter it at a younger or older age? There is a lot, and can be a lot, to be said for the social and personal experiences and perceptions that the age in which you encounter such a label or such a term can have. And I think at the end of the research, when again reading from this journal, the researchers found that although they didn't identify as asexual until later, they didn't identify under that term, the participants still had no history or a very small history of sexual desire and physical attraction that set them apart always from those middle school conversations, from those elementary school and high school conversations around sex and attraction, always feeling different from the others in some way. And so let's discuss. We have the research. Let's discuss. The experience that these participants had, I think, resonated with my own experience. I, for one, did not know that asexuality was a thing until I was in my teens. I always felt alone. I felt outside of that conversation about desire and attraction. And I think that lack of knowledge about asexuality, about that this was even a thing, the lack of understanding and knowledge led me to find that label later. So I, maybe not as old as some of the participants in the research, but I was definitely older when I first identified as asexual. And that's why, again, when I looked at this topic, I was like, this is going to be so interesting to learn about and do research on, because I can't imagine the experience of someone who may identify as asexual younger because they've had the experience of maybe being surrounded or growing up with the knowledge of this label, as now it's become more and more socially accepted. And on the flip side, someone who is older, maybe finding this label and identifying under it identifying their experience with the asexual community in like their 30s or 40s, or heck, again, in their 50s, maybe even 60s. How interesting it must be to live your life either for a short time, for a medium time, or for a long time with or without the knowledge that you are not alone, that there are others out there who feel and share similar experiences to you. I think the term asexuality has come a long way in inviting everyone, regardless of how old you are, regardless of what life experience you bring to the table, all kinds of things. And I do feel with this particular piece of our intersecting topics that there are some questions left unanswered. There are some points that have been missed. There is research and experiences and perceptions and accounts that could contribute so much to the conversation, and yet I feel like this is a underdeveloped area of research. And asexuality is a topic outside of other queer identities where the experience for older or younger or middle-aged bisexual people is not the same as asexually identifying individuals. And so there can be no assumptions, there can be no application over a wide range of identities. This is very personal. The thought that knowledge and understanding of specifically asexuality is very new and very young, and how isolating that can be for whatever time one considers an asexual identity without potentially knowing the label. But I don't know. I think that, again, as this is an underdeveloped area of study, there is so much more that could be done with the idea of asexuality and age. And again, looking at those social and personal factors. So I want to ask you guys, no matter what age you are when you are listening to this, heck, listen to it now and then wait 20 years when technology is like super advanced and maybe try and find this again, and then think about it even then. Think about your experience and spend a little time with the thoughts and experiences and ways of living, ways of navigating the world that have arisen due to your asexual identity and your age. Maybe you found the asexual label very young, and so maybe you skipped the awkward middle school phase, or maybe had a different kind of one because you had the asexual community around you, or maybe you found it much later in life and always felt out of place and alone, and how it must feel now to know that you are quite the opposite, that you are not ever alone. Let me know. And please take some time and sit with that. Give yourself time to think about it. And as always, ask yourself, what in this crazy world of perception and experience, what is your favorite part about your identity? I know in terms of this one, I'm so glad I found asexuality when I did, because it has just absolutely transformed the way I view the world. I view the world in so much more of a diverse and colorful and amazing way than I did before, and I feel so seen and heard and understood. I am so glad that I have also found other asexually identifying people, and that identifying as asexual as a teen has allowed me to branch out and reach out and get involved and research and study and build this kind of platform. So sit with the thoughts and think about what you love. And as always, continue to have those discussions, share your thoughts, and do your own research on how others experience the world. And then come back here so we can talk about it. And I will see you next time here at the Space.